with all the talk surrounding the lawsuits between Florida State and Clemson and the ACC, and a lot out there assuming that the ACC is just going to implode, I may have discovered ways, 3 of them to be exact, or reasons as to why the ACC may just in fact survive this thing. And I'm going to give you those 3 reasons right after this word from our sponsor. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing, only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you. What is up? Welcome in. Come in and make yourself comfortable. Belly yourself up to the bar. And let me pour you out a shot of top shelf college football content. You have landed yourself once again on another episode of Couz's Corner. On tap at Couz's Corner today, we are once again talking about conference realignment, this time as it applies to the ACC's possible implosion. Now, there's a lot of talk, especially in Big 12 country, about what schools the conference could get if the ACC implodes. Well, it's thanks to a few articles I've come across in the past few days and tying some things together in these articles, and then also, previous knowledge we have of the situation, in my own opinion, obviously, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why I think the ACC may actually survive this. And the first reason is the ACC Network. Now, I'm going to share an article with you that I came across today, actually, Saturday, May 25th, regarding the ACC Network and how important it could be to not only the schools in the ACC, but even to ESPN. This is an article from allsportsdiscussion.com. I'll leave a link to the article in the description box. That said, we want to talk about the ACC Network and its success in a vacuum. It's the wild card to the ACC's future almost nobody ever brings up. He shows a link to an article at cbssports.com talking about all the different power leagues and their revenue from this past fiscal year, 2023. But here's an interesting quote from that article. It says, though its $707 million figure was third among the power conferences, the ACC did report a $90 million revenue increase that paced Power 5 schools. According to USA Today, around $38 million of that increase came from TV revenue through its deal with Comcast. Each ACC school received an average of $44.8 million, while Notre Dame, a full-time ACC member in most sports, was granted $22.1 million due to its independent status in football. That's a quote from the CBS Sports article. Now back to the blog. So we know from last year's tax return, the ACC distributed nearly $444 million in television revenue. A $38 million increase brings that to about $482 million in television revenue. So that's an increase of $2.5 to $3 million per ACC school. Figuring the ACC's base deal at $20 million had a 4% increase, and we can safely say ACC Network reaching full distribution added $1.5 to $2.5 million per team. If you read the blog, you knew this already because we correctly predicted and posted this last year. Goes on to say Georgia Tech, in their recent financial statement, reported they made $9 million off the ACC Network. It's right there in print on page 12. Now, I do want to make a small correction. I went back and researched. It's actually on page 11 of that document, but nonetheless, it is there. For the fiscal year ending 2021 to 2022, that's not the entire year of Comcast distribution, which started in December of 21. It's only half. The ACC can expect another $1 to $3 million for a full year. From the math above, that's $150 million to $180 million going to ESPN. If 15 ACC teams are conservatively making 10, maybe $11 million from the ACC Network, and it's a 50-50 venture with ESPN, that's $150 to $165 million to the 4-letter network. The ACC Network is an unmitigated success for the ACC and ESPN. The numbers bear that out, and while I'll admit ESPN treats the ACC as a second-class citizen, it doesn't mean they don't want a future relationship with the conference. Some have speculated that ESPN would not re-up the ACC deal after 2025. There seems to be a debate whether this language is even correct, as Jim Phillips told ESPN via MSN.com. Not going to get into that. Let's keep going with the blog. With the profitability of the ACC network, even if a re-up is true, it's hard to fathom the ESPN simply cutting ties with a network that is clearly highly profitable. The ACC network has now picked up schools in California and Texas, and even if Cal, Stanford, and SMU aren't the biggest brands in those states, ESPN is a master at distribution and bundling. The ACC network may see another increase in revenue with expansion into those states. Now the ACC network won't keep FSU and Clemson in the fold in the long term, but losing them doesn't totally cripple the ACC network either. It affects the base media deal ceiling more than anything. That's one reason I think South Florida will one day be a prime candidate for the ACC if and when Florida State leaves. When considering the ACC's future, you must always take into account the role the ACC network may play. If you aren't, then you are assessing the situation with a massive gap in understanding what factors may play a role in the conference future. And I think the writer has a good point. The ACC network may just be enough motivation for not only the schools in the league, but most importantly for ESPN to keep the ACC together. If ESPN's making this $150 to $160 million from the ACC network, why would they want to dissolve it? They've put a lot of resources, a lot of time, a lot of money into building the ACC network. And if it's that profitable, they may want to keep it. And yes, I understand if losing Florida State and Clemson may decrease the value of it. But like the writer said, it would not necessarily kill it. If they can bring USF in to help fill that gap or at least mitigate the damages done by FSU leaving, it would still give them two teams in Florida if Miami stays. They could go out and add another team. Who knows who that might be? And get in even another market that they may not be in right now. They're in Texas. They're in California. They're in some big markets. So maybe that would be enough to salvage the ACC and prevent these other teams from leaving. And a lot of you might say, but Couz, the value is going to drop enough that potentially these other teams might leave. And that takes us to reason number 2 the ACC may just survive. And that is, where will the ACC teams go? Now, we can pretty much assume that Florida State and Clemson are leaving the league, right? It's probably a safe assumption. But if you look at the value of those two schools, yes, it would drop the ACC's value tremendously, losing those two top brands. However, they're already making more money than the Big 12 now. So for us Big 12 fans who think that, yeah, it's a guarantee that Louisville and NC State and Virginia Tech and Pitt and all these schools may want to jump ship to the Big 12, I'm not so sure that's a safe assumption. Yes, I've talked about it here on this channel, what some of these ACC teams would look like in the Big 12. Could we get them? Maybe we can get them, how good it would be to get them. But if you look at this realistically, and you look at the fact that the ACC is making right now more money than the Big 12 today, and the value of their TV deal is going to continue to increase, and it looks like the value of this Comcast deal is increasing as well. And if the value of the ACC network increases with the addition of SMU and Cal even more than it is today, that might help offset the loss of FSU and Clemson, at least to a large degree, and still might keep the ACC's value at least on par with the Big 12. And if you go back to an episode that my friends over at College Football Mafia did a few days ago, where they actually looked at the time value of money and what losing Florida State and Clemson would do to the ACC, it would make them about $5 million a year less profitable per team than the Big 12. And I don't think $5 million is enough to cause these teams to jump ship. And I know what you're thinking, but Couz, Miami may leave. North Carolina may leave. And that takes us to point number 3. And that is the state of North Carolina themselves may be reason enough for the North Carolina Tar Heels and the NC State Wolfpack to stay in the ACC. Great article. A gentleman by the name of Bill Farley over at who writes a blog called Conference Realignment by Bill Farley. Very simple name. Puts out a lot of great work. He's gotten a lot of documents with FOIA requests, and he got documents related to the ACC and funding they receive from the state of North Carolina. for having the conference in the state. Now, I'm not going to read the article to you. I'm going to leave a link to it in the description box, but what I'm going to do is share a Twitter post where Mr. Farley basically just outlines the highlights and the main points of the article. I thought that would be a lot more efficient and a lot less time consuming for the sake of the video, but it says, here it is. Summary of my thoughts on UNC's unique situation and realignment discussions. North Carolina set aside nearly $1 billion this year, the state of North Carolina, to promote sports, tourism, and economic development. Second point, investments include $15 million to host ACC events and $25 million to win the University World Summer Games for 2029. The third point, the ACC provides North Carolina a source to host multiple events that attract fans to the state. Up to 67 sporting events that the state has to host by the year 2032, 2033, per this article. That is all, again, tied to the ACC being in the state of North Carolina. Next point, North Carolina is home to 4 ACC schools, UNC, North Carolina State, Wake Forest, and Duke. Not having these events in the state would affect all 4 of these institutions, all 4 of their alumni bases, and the 4 cities in which these schools are located. They lose tourism money. They lose economic development money. Right? Next point. Politicians in North Carolina are likely opposed to the optics of North Carolina universities playing for Big Ten or SEC conference championships in Indianapolis or Atlanta, when they can be held right in the state, in Charlotte, in Greensboro, wherever. Because those are towns that compete with North Carolina for sports tourism. Next point, just 5% of the state's economic development budget could address the financial gap between UNC and SEC Big Ten members. And the final point, sports tourism dollars score their first victory over ESPN Fox Bucks. And he says, in his opinion, because of this, UNC stays in the ACC. So basically, in a nutshell, the economic development money that the ACC gets from the state of North Carolina trumps any money, any gain in money the schools may get from being in the Big Ten or the SEC. And that's money the conference would lose if these schools, if the conference implodes. And if they lose Florida State, Clemson, and North Carolina, there's a good chance the conference could implode. A better chance anyway. But it looks to me like the powers that be who oversee the North Carolina State University system, the Board of Governors, who, oh, by the way, there are a lot of members on that board who are NC State alum. It's going to be hard to get everybody to agree for UNC to leave the league by themselves. Now, if they take NC State along with them, maybe it could happen. But then again, what about Wake and Duke? There's a lot more at stake here, a lot more schools that would be affected than just the University of North Carolina. Now, does this mean with 100% certainty that the ACC is going to survive? Absolutely not. But I do think these are fair arguments to make. And this is why, in my opinion, the breakup of the ACC is not quite as cut and dry, not quite as easy as what happened with the PAC, because A, you got this long grant of rights that goes all the way to 2036. And B, there are a lot more complicated things at play here, like the ACC Network, for example, that's tied in with ESPN that I mentioned in point 1. You got the fact that the Big 12, where a lot of these teams would have to go to if the ACC does implode. Not the Big Ten and SEC doesn't want most of the ACC teams, in my opinion. So they would have to go somewhere else. And I think it's in their best interest to keep the ACC going instead of going to the Big 12, because the ACC is probably going to make just as much as the Big 12. And if it is less, it ain't going to be that much less. Why? Because North Carolina is probably not going anywhere, because they're getting so much economic development money, and it's all about politics. So therefore, the people in charge of the North Carolina University system are probably not going to let the ACC implode. There you have it. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Do you agree with me that these are all 3 valid points that could keep the ACC intact? Or do you think the ACC is still going to blow up. And if you think that, I want to know why in the comment section. Also, I want to give a shout out to my paid VIP channel members of the day. I want to give a shout out to Brandon Bailey, Tom Reinhart, C. Dotson B. 210, and Todd Biela. Thank all of you for your support. Thank you all for being paid VIP members here at the channel. If you want to become a paid VIP member, it's very easy. All you have to do is hit the join button below the video. If you don't see a join button on your device, go to my channel homepage. Right beside my profile photo, you'll see a join button. You hit it, it'll show you the two levels, the pub level and the club level, show you the perks that go along with them, which, oh, by the way, I have now added members-only videos. If you want access to that, join today. I also want to mention my partnership with On It Athlete Trading Cards. If you like trading cards and you want to support your favorite student athletes with NIL, buy yourself some On It NIL trading cards with the link in my description box. If you use that link, I will also make a small commission from the sale. It's a way to support me and a way to support your favorite student athletes. There's another video you can check out regarding conference realignment in the ACC right here. Click on it. Thanks for tuning into this episode. Have a top shelf day and cue country roads.